tag us on IET India and use the hashtags hashtag GFTC and hashtag decode the future.
Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, we now come to the end of the session. What we have heard so far, the work that we heard that is being done, is nothing short of fiction. Multiple vectors are being worked on multiple dimensions in the healthcare space. Multimodality convergence is coming in to sort of take the treatment and diagnostics to a very different level. With the help of all of this, I think we will achieve what we started off with, is basically the quadruple aim, wherein we would be able to improve the experience for the caregiver, experience for the patient, drive cost down, and have positive outcomes to mankind. So looking at it at a very different level, and looking forward to seeing you all in the 2023 FTC and the health track thereon. Thank you so much for being with us. Much appreciated.
And the entire team of the Disease Surveillance Project. If you want to understand more, you can always talk to them and go to the first booth at the expo. You will have a live demo there too. Moving on to our next topic and the next session, which is about the future of mobility and transport in India. It's an interesting topic because we're talking about electrified freight, or the national platform rather for electrified freight. And to start off the proceedings, I would request Mustafa Wajid sir to please come to the stage. Mustafa sir is the chair of the Future of Mobility and Transport Focus for the IIT in India.
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. My name is Mustafa Wajid. I'm an electrical engineer and entrepreneur, and I am also an IET volunteer for the more than a decade now. And this is an interesting session. We have two very powerful and experienced ladies as panelists. So I'd like to invite each one of them by turn. And can I invite Sharvari Patki first? She's come all the way from Bombay to be with us today. She leads the e-mobility practice at the World Resource Institute, WRI, which is a global organization present in 90 countries. And she's an electrical engineer herself. And hopefully we will learn a lot more from her as the session goes on. Please take your seat. As we all know, technology is interesting. As engineers, we sometimes get obsessed with it. But in the real world, to convert it into scale and actually on the ground, it can't happen without business models and investment. This requires a very different perspective. And our second panelist is a rather accomplished lady from that domain. I introduce Vasudha Madhavan. Please, Vasu, please. She's an investment banker and has had a long career at senior positions in the banking industry, and actually now runs her own investment banking firm. So she will enlighten us on issues related to business models and financing and so on, because the mobility domain, as we all know, a good example is the electric buses that are now being deployed in cities in India. The technology was available already about 7-8 years ago, but it actually took off only when the business model and the financing fell in place. Otherwise, it was just another discussion that was going on in circles. In fact, at one time I called it an Antakshri. Everybody was singing songs. Nothing really was happening. So this has happened in the past. So today we will focus on this. Just a few things to understand. Decarbonization, I think everybody is aware of the word, has become a global priority. In India, it's not only about the environment. It certainly is. There's no doubt about it. We have to improve our environment and we have to decarbonize. But at the same time, in India, it's also a question of energy security. I'm not sure if people have kept track, but in the first half of this financial year, we as a country have spent $90 billion importing petroleum, coal and gas. So if you extrapolate that to a yearly figure, that shows you the kind of foreign exchange that we as a country are spending, and that raises issues of energy security in this rather complex geopolitical environment. Energy security, decarbonization have to be looked at hand in hand in India. If you look at the overall energy consumption in India, the primary energy consumption, it's about approximately 35 to 36 exajoules. That is 10 raised to the power of 18. It can be converted into a million tons of oil, blah, 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 BTU, etc. But as electrical engineers, we love this unit joules for some reason. And therefore, I will stick to that in all discussions. It's easier to follow. The global primary energy consumption is about 634 exajoules. So India represents roughly about somewhere between 5 and 5.5%. But the challenge in India is that 83% of this comes from fossil fuels. This is not sustainable. And within this 83%, the big elephant in the room is transportation. So we have to do something to electrify transportation, otherwise I am afraid that we will run into all kinds of problems as our economy grows. And this is today to focus on this. I think the media is latched on to electric cars, electric bikes and so on. But you know, the real elephant in the room is logistics. Okay, with hardly a few percentage, Sharvari was educating me on this. She said the total vehicles in India which carry cargo or which move things from place to place is hardly 5% of the overall Indian population of vehicles. But it consumes a majority of the fuel that India consumes. Now these numbers are somewhat compelling. So it's very clear that while we electrify two-wheelers, three-wheelers, four-wheelers, cars and so on, the big problem in the room is logistics and freight. The government of India has taken cognizance of this, and the word fast forwarding freight actually comes from a new initiative of the government called eFast, which we will talk about in this. It's a very recently announced initiative. It's hardly 2 months old. Hence we have only 2 panelists. So maybe 1 year later we'll have more people to talk about it. So, but I can tell you that both these people were present at the launch and they conducted the launch. So we will hear from the, sorry, but horse's mouth. I know it's not a nice thing to say that to ladies, but anyway. And the person in WRI who is leading this effort along with the government, the teams from the government is Sharvari. So we have, as I said, straight from the horse's mouth. And how will this actually happen? Frankly, nobody has a clue. Okay, there are technology challenges, there are financial challenges, there are business model challenges, and I'd like Vasudha to weigh in on that. And we will structure this session into broadly 4 parts. I would like Sharvari and Vasudha to make some brief opening comments on to share their perspective. And then we will deal with the 3 key issues. One is the technology part of it, because unless we have the right technology, we will not have such vehicles on the road. Or should they be battery powered? Should they be hydrogen powered? Should they be a hybrid? I mean, there are many questions that need to be looked at. How will we charge them on the highways in the middle of nowhere? These are issues that will have to be looked at. Can the grid handle it? The power grid? Because this is going to be a very large load consuming kind of a load. These are issues on technology that will come in. Of course, digitalization, connectivity, cloud, the whole platform approach to manage this whole thing is equally important. So we'll deal with some of those issues under the technology part. The second part will be business models and financing, where I would request Vasudha to lead the discussion on what kind of stuff is possible. And the third is very critical, and that is any policy this is basically 2-3 months old. As it evolves, will require policy interventions or policy modifications. We are already beginning to see some areas where the policy needs to be upgraded to suit real world conditions. So we will talk about that. And hopefully if we finish all this stuff, then all of you can have lunch. So until then, you have to listen to us. The reason we are sitting so far away is that you could see the video clearly. But the actual reason is that I'm also afraid of these 2 ladies. So having said that, let us start with Sharvari to give her opening remarks and then to you, Vasudha. Over to you.
Mustafa ji, thank you so much. Thank you to IET team for inviting us here and picking up this topic which is of national importance. Before we actually move on to what eFast platform actually intends to do, let's take a step back and understand why decarbonization is required. He has already put all those numbers on the table, and number itself make the compelling argument. At the same time, 14% of your entire greenhouse gas emission comes from the road transport. If we talk about energy consumption, 1/3 of the energy is consumed by transport, and out of which 90% is consumed by road transport. If you just turn the math that how many vehicles are getting electrified by how many vehicle kilometers are getting electrified, then we understand importance why we need to talk about commercial vehicle electrification more, why we need to talk about public transport electrification more. This is one number understanding. Another is in decarbonization, we say we need to have 3 strategies: avoid, shift, and improve. When you say avoid, can we avoid this kilometer altogether by probably shifting your production basis to near to requirement basis? May not be possible, but can we look at it to avoid it? Shift is, can we efficiently move freight movement to better mode of transport which are less polluting, such as train, inland waterways, and sea waterways. We are blessed by inland waterways and we are blessed by many ports, but we as a country do not use our port for internal movement, which primarily happens road. Why it is important? Because when the first transport logistic policy got written for India, it was aimed that 80% of the freight movement will happen by rail and only 20% will happen by road. If you see today, the video has already shown that 71% of our freight movement happens by road. And this is going to increase when we reach that 5 trillion goal as India as a country economy. So, is it possible to shift everything? Yes. But will it take time? Yes. Last mile and first mile linkages with rail does not happen overnight. That will take time. But by that time, your freight requirement is going to increase multifold by 2050. So then it becomes important to concentrate on the third parameter, which is improve, where the electrification parts come in. What eFast India intends to do? As on date today, as Mustafa ji has rightly pointed it out, we have multiple use cases in the last mile delivery. We know that Swiggy, Zomato is getting electrified. We know that multiple options are available for low LCV, which is light commercial vehicle, which are typically last mile delivery options within the city. But the problem gets peculiar when it becomes the mid haul and the long haul. Because mid haul and long haul has different characteristic requirement. The distance is long, there are no opportunity charging possibilities, the payload becomes very critical, and hence, and plus there are no currently established use cases which can prove that this is a viable, successful option to decarbonize. And hence, Niti Aayog and WRI India came together to start a platform where people can work together, because one person, one organization, one company cannot solve this problem. As an ecosystem, we have to break that silo and come together and find what are those possible solutions, what are those use cases where government can intervene, and that was a motto behind why eFast India started.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just to add to that, the IET Future of Mobility and Transport panel will also play an active supporting role in this, because this being a neutral panel has its big advantages. We can bring in people who otherwise keep fighting as competitors onto the same stage. And we believe that that will be a useful thing. We see this as an important agenda for the IET's panel going forward. With that, over to you, Vasudha, for your opening remarks on how do you see this happening? Is there enough money on the table? Are they willing to give it to this sector? And issues like that. So over to you.
Thanks. Am I audible? Thank you, Mr. Wajid. Thanks, Sharvari, for such a comprehensive introduction, really. My role in this industry has really been to catalyze investments into the private sector investments into companies in this space, and we have worked quite intensively with global private equity funds, Indian private equity ecosystem, venture capital funds, strategic funds, sovereign funds, and so on and so forth. It's really been a process of investing into this process so far, because we knew a few years ago that this whole electric mobility revolution had started, and almost in stealth in India, because there were a lot of hundreds of startups that were struggling to raise capital, but they were doing brilliant things to solve this problem of decarbonization of transport from various perspectives that they were trying to solve. But capital was always a concern. It continues to be something. In fact, at COP27 also, this has been the largest topic of discussion, financing and funding this whole path to decarbonization. So very much the role that my firm plays is very much in that track. So coming, so given this context that decarbonization has to happen, we have to move towards sustainable fuels, we have to move towards, we have to tackle this transportation part of it as a very core part of decarbonization alongside industry and other, which are big emitters of carbon. But when we just specifically focus on that, what's very critical is how do we, what makes for investable models? What do these investors want? And understanding that, and then saying, how can businesses respond to this need, and then therefore work collaboratively to create businesses and create business models that are then solving this ultimate problem, right? So that's really the challenge. In general, there is a lot of, definitely there has been a lot of new capital, traditional capital that is now getting focused on this area, including investors of even sovereign funds, which are country-specific investments, which are getting allocated towards decarbonization as a goal, which is great. As a country, India is a very, very large market for logistics. It's 14%, close to 14% of GDP, which is probably close to around 300 billion US. So it's a very large market to try and even as a business to try and tackle. So it's going to need a lot of capital. It's going to need a lot of private sector participation to achieve the ultimate goal of decarbonization and electrification. We will talk about various aspects of this as we move on. But as opening comments, I guess what we really need to think about is where is the capital coming from, which sorts of companies are trying to solve this problem, and who are the ultimate customers that will use these logistics services or freight services, and therefore will be very critical to starting that value chain of decarbonization. So we'll get into the depths of it as we move on. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, just to add to that, I think it's also a great opportunity for young engineers to look at creating startups that can contribute to, better ideas, better efficiency, better productivity in this domain. And I would appeal to the particularly the young engineers to actually develop this as an entrepreneurial effort, because logistics is kind of a permanent part of our lives. It's never going to go away unless we get to the Star Trek situation where we can beam things across. I don't see that happening so easily. As a student of quantum physics, I have some fundamental problems, and therefore I don't believe that will happen so soon. So having said that, we'll move to the technology part. Now, just to understand the scale of the problem, freight means that you need a very high payload capacity on the vehicle. So if I put batteries onto that vehicle, a part of that payload capacity comes down because the battery weight absorbs part of that capability of the vehicle. Now, this is one of the big challenges in freight transportation. So, from what I understand, there are 3 or 4 categories of logistics of freight transportation. They call it the medium mile, which is typically about 250, 300 kilometers, somewhere in that range, which seems to be more suitable for batteries, but with an approach combining rapid charging. That means I carry batteries on board only for about maybe 150 kilometers, and then I do a rapid charge in 15 minutes at a highway charging station. So that reduces the weight of the batteries on board of the vehicle. So this is one approach that is being talked about. Then you have the kind of, I don't know if it's kind of long distance, or after medium, is there any other category? Or when you go into long distance and you talk of much bigger payloads like 20 tons and 40 tons and so on, this approach of smaller batteries, rapid charging is not going to be very effective. It's a technology will have to come which some other option has to be provided. And that option, I think, will remain to, or is moving in the direction of green hydrogen. Now, I understand from the Germans, because we've been in touch with various organizations there, both at government level as well as the engineering community level. I think that they are going to stop the sale of diesel trucks by 2030. They are taking up a huge green hydrogen program. They're going to pipe it into their gas grid, make it available on the German autobahns, which are their highways, so that trucks can refuel very easily. And this is being done by now very large companies. The big automobile guys are all committing very large numbers in billions of euro to develop hydrogen-based heavy vehicle systems, going up to 40 tons and so on and so forth. So I think we need to learn from that, and with the Germans, I have a great respect for their engineering commitments that they make, because I still remember 20 years ago they said 50% of our energy will come from renewables within 20 years from now, or 20 years from now. I mean, nobody believed it. They actually achieved it with 5 or 6 years in advance. So I suspect that this green hydrogen thing will happen in Germany, and I think that a closer cooperation has to be done. There's also a lot of work happening in the UK on hydrogen, and that is something that we need to look at carefully, because the UK has also taken an interesting stance on decarbonization that involves at one level small modular nuclear reactors to generate electricity, and also to do hydrogen-based stuff for transportation. So this is a very interesting combination of things happening. So I think we will have to have a situation where both battery-powered systems and hydrogen-powered systems will have to coexist. There is, of course, the mechanical recharge systems that are possible with primary batteries like aluminum air or zinc air. These are battery systems that are being talked about. So the powertrain part of the vehicle will remain the same, which is the motor, the controller, the transmission system, etc. It is the energy source which is going to cause the disruption in the technology area. So instead of going into the, how will the motor be, and how will the controllers be, and how will the transmission be, I would rather focus the technology discussion on the energy sources and the infrastructure required to enable these energy sources to become usable by the logistic companies and the truck providers. So that this is a very complex topic, so I'm trying to kind of keep it within some boundary conditions. So Sarvari, we'd like your thought on this conundrum, or rather confusing perspective that we see before us.
Okay, I'll try to simplify at my level as much as I can. If we talk about challenges in electric mobility, especially in the medium and heavy duty vehicle, when we say medium and heavy duty, it is up to 3.5 ton to 7.5 ton is medium duty, above 7.5 to 40 ton becomes your heavy duty. And mid and long haul definitions sir has already covered. Each use cases has its specific set of challenges and opportunities. When we talk about medium duty vehicle, battery size with a mid-haul freight requirement can still manage to get electrified with fast charging in place. However, downtime becomes absolute grave area when it comes to logistic, We already know as a country, our logistical efficiency is really below compared to developing countries. That's the aim with which to improve national logistic policy got launched a month back. When we are talking about improving the logistical efficiency, that means reducing the time of material movement from A to B, we cannot afford to have a downtime. Then we need to find out a solution which will not have downtime. Just to draw parallel to MDV, in the last mile delivery, when the vehicle is moving from point A to point B in the city, during that unloading, loading time, it still have a window of opportunity charging. We call it as a opportunity charging. Or when we talk about personal car, as per statistic, 80% of the charging happens as a destination charging. Either it is happening at office or it is happening at your home. But that's not the case with logistical vehicles. They are continuously on the go, and that is how their total cost of ownership plays out. If the vehicle has to be down for 12 hours or 3 hours because it is to get charged, the economics fall apart. So medium haul and medium duty has that set of challenge. When it comes to heavy duty, because the payload is heavy, the torque required is heavy, the battery size becomes heavy, which has adverse impact on the payload capacity. Initially the truck, which was carrying 40 ton, with a 3 ton to 4 ton battery, the payload capacity reduces. That means the cost per ton of material movement has increased. That means we have adversely impacted logistical efficiency. Because typically logistical efficiency is cost and time. How much money I am spending and how much time I am taking. That's it. So as he rightly pointed out, charging infrastructure and rapid charging infrastructure becomes a key pain point in medium haul and long haul, especially it happens on highways. We all know, probably we stay in urban areas, so we do not get load shedding concept. At least in Mumbai, we don't have load shedding. But in urban area...
I'm glad you qualified that, because in Bangalore, load shedding is part of regular life. So. Please, continue.
Okay, we are blessed in Mumbai, we don't have load shedding. So with load shedding in situation, with no electrical infrastructure which can take care of that rapid charging high power, the highway electrification becomes the important piece of the puzzle. Probably government has already taken the cognizance and...
Yeah, I'd like to just interject there, Sharma. The problem of rapid charge first needs a little bit of clarity on definition. Because people are talking of supercharger, fast charger. These are marketing terms. Traditional charging typically is done at about roughly 0.5 C, which means that about 2 hours is a comfortable time to charge a lithium-ion battery. Of course, if you can do it slower, you get more battery life. That's a different subject. But there are today technologies like lithium titanate oxide where I can charge at 5 C, which means that I can do a charge in 20 minutes. Sorry, 12 minutes. Okay, and this is where the charge rate or the C rate of the battery, as engineers we need to stay away from these marketing terms like super, fast, rapid, etc. and talk about C rates. Clearly the C rates of around, let's say 4 to 5 are technically doable now, today. I'm part of a startup which has actually developed this technology and is deploying it. By the way, the company that is using that technology now and scaling it up with rapid, what we call this 12-minute charging, is the company that won the IET award yesterday, Altigreen. By the way, that's the company that Vasudha helped for as an investment banker to raise money. So it's a small world. Okay,
and Mr. Saran regularly
yeah, we are actually seeing 12-minute charging working now with about roughly 4 or 5 C rate. So I think that the other thing as electrical engineers, we need to qualify this because a lot of people get confused between power and energy. And when I want to do rapid charge, the problem is not an energy challenge, it's a demand challenge. For example, if I want to charge a 100 kilowatt hour battery in 15 or let's say 10 minutes, I need a 600 kilowatt plus maybe another 10-20%, say 750 kilowatt supply system.
Correct.
Okay, and if I have a parking bay with let us say 10 such chargers for 10 trucks, and if all of them are working at the same time, I need 7,500 kilowatt. 7,500 kilowatt cannot be connected at low voltage. It has to be connected at high voltage, which means that I need to go to maybe distribution system may not be able to handle it. I need to go to the transmission system.
Exactly.
So will the transmission system give me a connection somewhere in the middle of nowhere on a highway? Interesting question. Obviously they should, they must, but it will take a hell of a lot of time to resolve this. Because transmission system guys are not used to supplying different loads. They treat the railways as an exception. Otherwise they only deal with distribution companies. So these are new challenges that will come up on charging infrastructure. Sorry, but this electrical engineering part is going to be an important challenge
Absolutely.
in terms of demand because it's going to be unpredictable. You don't know when the truck will come and charge. It need not be only at night when the demand is low. It can also be during the daytime, and we can have a demand shortage which leads us to load shedding. Okay, in college we were taught that load shedding is a emergency scenario. You use it only when there is a serious problem. But in India, due to various conditions, 20 years ago, in fact, I had said it as a joke. I said, now we are using it as a planning tool. Okay, some of you will get electricity now, some of you will get it later.
They call it as a peak shaving.
Correct. So, freight electrification, I think at one level has to do a lot with the battery, hydrogen, and other energy source technology that needs to be used there. But the equally important part is how are we going to enable refueling or charging in an economic and reliable manner. I mean, let's say you drive a truck up to the charging station and you suddenly find there's no electricity. I mean, what are you going to do? Then all her talk about logistic efficiency goes out of the window.
I think she mentioned multimodal logistics. I think that can be while we are talking about technology for electrification of freight, we tend to talk about battery electric vehicles, we will talk about hydrogen, we may talk about fuel cells like aluminum fuel cell or zinc or other metal air batteries. All of these are untested. The key thing with lithium ion battery technology is as you do longer ranges, you will start to increase the battery capacity either way, whether you have charging capacity en route, which you need to have or not, you will still need to put in larger batteries, and that will take away from the payload capacity of the vehicle, and that's a non-negotiable thing, because that, anyway, logistics, the whole purpose will get defeated if you reduce the amount of payload that a truck can carry. So therefore, the optionalities of various fueling technologies is important, refueling technologies is important, but I think a third dimension could be how can we create multimodal logistics in India, which we severely lack here, and we've seen that in certain other countries and our neighbors, in fact, that do it well, is having a ferry system or an internal waterway system that can also pitch in and reduce the time that the freight spends on the road. And and the benefit that we as a country have is we have good sunshine throughout the year. So solar panels have been deployed. In fact, I know of companies that are working on solar ferries and solar boats or shipping, as well as clean fuels for shipping. All of these can actually help in reducing the load on road transportation and decongesting it. So in a way, this whole discussion around decarbonizing freight is not just about vehicles on the road, but what else can we do? For instance, drones are becoming a big thing. There are several companies, there is now policy intervention in this regard. There's private sector activity around drone-based deliveries. So, and larger drones are also coming into play, where I know companies that are creating battery packs designed for these things. So some of these vehicles or alternative vehicles can actually help in decongesting the roads, reducing the pressure on energy. And energy grid is, this is no small joke, and even funding can't solve that problem. So I think we need to think along some of those lines as well when we think of technological alternatives to.
Yeah, thank you, Vasudha. I'm sure the audience appreciates why we have an investment banker on the panel. He's able to give it a completely different perspective and widen the discussion. As engineers, we tend to get lost sometimes, deep down. I think waterways is a very important part. As I know, currently in Kerala on the coast, they are using on a pilot basis hydrogen-powered boats and ferries for transporting people and goods. I hope that experiment succeeds, and I'm sure that given our coastline, there are a lot more opportunities that can be done. I think waterways is a very important piece of thing. I'm glad you brought in the drone topic. I think that's an interesting area to look at. The physics of the problem is that it actually requires far less energy than what the road transport requires per kilogram of payload. And this is something that many people, our IET president is here, he's an aeronautical engineer, he'll probably kind of agree with that. It takes much lower energy to transport something through the air than on the road or on the rail. This is a reality that if we can get the aerodynamics right, I think that is something that, so the drones for what kind of delivery, because India is a kind of multiple level logistic problem. You have what we call as a small town. In the UK, you would call it a big city. And what we call a village, you would call a town. So I think that the logistic movement, even at an intra-town level, we always talk intercity, because that's the big, occupies the mind. But I think there's a lot more need for innovative solutions there. And once again, an opportunity for young engineers. I think people who are attending this and also the IET should publicize this, to come up with solutions which are tailor-made to suit application conditions and use cases.
Logistics is growing, the industry and the use cases are growing at 53% year on year. So it's a huge growth sector. Last mile logistics, smaller regional logistics, apart from just the long haul, which are more corridor based, but really city logistics is really growing at a very fast pace.
Recent study, just to add Vasudha's point, recent study shows that by 2024, last mile delivery market of India would be $6 million in profit.
6 billion?
$6 billion in profit.
Oh, in profit terms?
In profit.
Oh, she's talking your language now. I thought she was an electrical engineer. Okay, so I think that gives a perspective on the technology challenges that we are looking at in terms of freight, electrifying freight transportation. Broadly, to sum up, that the vehicle is obviously an important piece. The energy storage technologies are going to be critical. Refueling is going to be important. But it's also equally important to look at waterways. It's also equally important to look at drones and their applicability in a multi-tier geographical system, which has, hub and spoke models, maybe from one town to a couple of smaller towns and so on and so forth. So I think that is something that we can look at as a summary of what we've discussed. So we'll move quickly now on to the next stuff. And Vasudha, where's the money for all this?
Yeah.
How do startups who want to do things in this, or how do companies who want to electrify their fleets, how is it being looked at? Because, one of the problems in India is the traffic regulations. And I was told this by a company with whom I was talking. He said, if the vehicle has an accident, the police go after the guy who owns the vehicle, as per the record. Okay, now this creates a different problem, because the company that owns the vehicle might be sitting in a nice posh office in Mumbai, and the accident may happen in near, 1,000 kilometers away, and the cops will then radio the Mumbai cops to go and arrest that guy. This is a practical problem. A lot of, challenges are there which are not technical here, which are rather, administrative, bureaucratic. And I think the investment community looks at those risks as to how these things will play out and so on and so forth. So
Yeah.
So how do you guys from the investment banking side or investor community look at this?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's pretty much fundamental and intuitive on where the challenges lie. So let's just think through this value chain a little bit. Who's the user of logistics, right? You have companies, enterprises that are sending goods or products across the country or within regions, or picking it up from warehouses and sending it to distribution points. This is happening on a daily basis. So enterprises are the customers, right? And whether they are FMCG companies that need to send bread and paper towels and whatnot, or these are large mining companies that need to move ore from the mines into their factories. So logistics is happening on a daily basis across multiple use cases, multiple industry sectors, and at various distances, various ranges that the vehicles do. So that is and this segment, which is the enterprise segment, is happy to move towards electrification. They say, many of them would say that this would save us cost, this would maybe bring in newer technologies, maybe we would have more software applications that we can utilize to manage our fleet logistics and so on and so forth. So there is an interest from these enterprise customers to move towards decarbonized transport, right? And then you come to where is the next step in the value chain is who is making these vehicles? Where are the OEMs that are making these electric vehicles or these different newer energy vehicles? And that is where, again, we have few players. We have a lot of incumbents that are trying to now phase out their traditional vehicle programs and then move towards clean mobility vehicles. And we need to make sure that these companies can raise funding or raise capital. In the case of large companies, global OEMs, automotive OEMs which are doing this, they already have a lot of capital. They would probably not have that much of a difficulty. But in India, we've seen the Tata Group, the Mahindra Group, which are large incumbents, raise funding just for the electric vehicle programs, right? So there is capital that's flowing into these companies. What is happening is when these companies now go to the third step, let me talk about the third step in the value chain, is logistics service providers, right? There are trucking companies, there are providers that are aggregating these trucks or vehicles and saying we will fulfill the requirements of these enterprises, we will deliver the goods using these new energy vehicles. These are the companies that need to ultimately procure the vehicles. So somebody's got to make them, somebody's got to buy them, and then somebody's, which is the enterprise, which is going to pay for these services. So we have these three core, core players in this value chain. And what will oil this value chain, so to speak, will be the financier. Somebody who's a bank or a non-banking financial institution will come and say, okay, I'm going to help this aggregator purchase this vehicle so that that vehicle can then be used to decarbonize this logistics use case. Now the real challenge is for the financier to be able to write that check. And where does that problem come in? The problem comes in because this vehicle is completely new. They have no idea of what should be the real value of this vehicle. So in every credit assessment, you assess the user who's going to take that loan from you, and you assess the vehicle that you're hypothecating, right? And that vehicle is a brand new animal. Nobody knows what's the residual value. Nobody knows how long the battery would last. There is no life cycle data on that vehicle. So this is currently the most critical problem that financiers are facing, and hence the entire value chain is facing. And here is where we can use technology.
Just to add Vasudha's point, 40% of the electric vehicle cost is the battery cost. That is the biggest jigsaw puzzle. And today, as on date today, we do not know what is the exact residue value of that battery. And if the OEM is committing 7 lakh kilometer, is it really going, 7 years, is it really going to run 7 years? That battery replacement is still an unknown answer, because of which financing problem becomes even difficult. And on top of it, the maximum freight ownership market in India is a defragmented market. There are many people who own only 2 or 3 trucks. They may not have enough credit where the repayment can be as quick as 5 years or 3 years. Then the problem becomes even worse.
Yeah, Vasudha, the other aspect of this is insurance.
Yeah.
And I find that insurance companies are still reluctant to do insurance for electric vehicles. Of course, the reluctance
same
is,
reason of-
yeah, the reluctance
yeah.
is coming down. But if I go back 4 years, because I mentor a variety of these electric vehicle companies, one of the big hurdles there is to cross the insurance problem. And without insurance guys being on board, this program will never take off. Because nobody will want to drive an uninsured truck or an uninsured vehicle or an uninsured boat on a waterway on this. So how do you see that shaping up?
So what's currently happening, and in real life, how is it really playing out today in India, is a lot of this pressure or a lot of the onus of backstopping the risk of the vehicle or even operating it for some of these customers, etc., is coming down to the OEM. And so the OEM that is traditionally would have just made the vehicle and shipped it out of their factory and gotten paid for it through their dealerships, are now having to also go and operate a network of these vehicles, manage the fleet, take care of the warranty, take care of maybe even insurance of all of these things. So that is in a sense, we are in a flux where the business models for making, operating and managing the fleets are still in sort of flux. However, I feel that there is a strong case to be made for technology that can solve this problem of insurance and financing by causing or by leading to more visibility of usage data and of end of life use of these batteries. So it is very possible, for instance, to put a bunch of vehicular batteries and into an energy storage use case. Stationary applications which can be used to store energy from renewable energy sources. So all of this for that we need to create that market as well, and that's happening. It is also slowly progressing, that part of it.
Reuse and recycling, sorry.
Yeah.
No, the insurance, what I understand is that the visibility of what is happening in terms of state of health of the vehicle and its components would be a vital ingredient for insurance companies to build up their confidence. Now, this is something which is a huge opportunity area for engineers to look at startups which can collect data, do machine learning, analysis, algorithms, maybe even a little bit of AI to compute what is the state of health indicator.
I mean, just like IITs and some of the leading engineering colleges have very vibrant startup ecosystems and incubators, and some of them are working on this problem.
Predictive modeling is a topic which is already picked up by DST and NITI Aayog to exactly precisely solve this problem, that what is the battery life remaining at a cell level. Because unless and until we solve that problem, the finance, insurance, confidence on a technology, those questions will still remain unanswered.
Good, so that means we have to work closely with the healthcare track of the IET, FTC, because we just saw a presentation on how they are detecting diseases in different parts of the country. So something similar to that has to be done on freight logistics as well. So, okay, having said that, I think if we can just summarize here saying that there is capital available. Risk mitigation is something that will be a function of the business model, and a business model that reduces that risk will attract capital. So how are we going to do that thing? And in that risk there are technical risks and there are regular risks or engineering risks and non-engineering risks. And the insurance companies would probably come on board if there is a lot more visibility on the state of health and condition of these kind of vehicles that are deployed on the road.
As long as you have a business model that can make revenues on a sustained basis and make profits, you'll attract capital.
Yeah, bottom line, investment guys always want to make money. So having said that, I think that's a very interesting perspective. It also gives a lot of ideas for engineers to look at how to create value in this space. But it's very clear that engineers and bankers have to work together to actually make this happen. It's not going to be possible to just solve it purely by application of technology. And scaling is impossible unless the bankers are on board. So how do we get a middle of the road path to do this? We wanted to discuss the policy, but to be fair to the government of India, the policy is just 2 months old. So I would like request all of you to actually think about what we've discussed and maybe send in some ideas to the IET office in India. We compile that. And I think it would be fair to discuss the nuances of policy a little later. We are also short on time. And I know that it's lunch time. So anything that Sharvari you would like to add, maybe 2-3 minutes on policy before we start winding up.
Electrification of vehicle, each category has its own curve. Two-wheeler, three-wheeler have already picked up. Last mile delivery is picking up. Mid and heavy duty will pick up little later. Even if we think about 2030 target, they are later in the game. The question is, how do we all, the entire stakeholder of freight ecosystem come together? Because each one of them have their own pain point. Logistic provider says, I am the one who is actually putting money on the table to buy that electric truck unless and until the user is paying willing to pay little extra. How do I make money? For him, it is, I want to get transfer material from A to B. How and why, it is your problem, it is not my baby. So at somewhere we need to come together and solve this problem along with financiers, because they are the one who is actually going to finance it. So can we create that triangle where finance, OEM and logistic provider along with the end user come together, create a successful business plan and then run scalable pilot is something which we all need to work on, and probably that is going to crack how we can make electrification possible in freight.
And help in the evolution of policy. Yeah, thank you for that. I think she just described the agenda for the next 1 year for the IET Future of Mobility panel. Okay, and we need to work closely with the WRI team and with Vasudha and her brethren in the investment banking community to actually do that. I think one of the takeaways from this, Suman and Shekhar, is to follow this through with maybe an offline discussion in a week or 10 days to see how to kind of give this a shape and make this a more prominent agenda, so that at the next FTC we will talk more about actual pilots and use cases rather than prospective ideas and solutions. Is that are you up for it, ladies?
100%.
Madam?
Yes.
Yeah, with that, I know everybody is hungry, so am I. So I thank these two ladies for sparing their time and coming. She's come all the way from Mumbai to attend this, and Vasudha actually flew in from Ahmedabad. She had some other meeting. She changed her schedule to be here. I'm very personally grateful, and all of us are thankful to you for having made those changes in your schedules and being with us today. I hope the audience found it as interesting as I did. And I'm sure that this will result in more work in the IET, on the IET platform, and useful contribution towards decarbonization and improved energy security. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mustafa sir. Thank you, Sharvari. Thank you, Vasudha. I would request Mustafa sir to kindly felicitate our fellow speakers.
Hub and spoke model.
And I would like to invite Sir Julian Young to kindly come to the stage to felicitate Mustafa.
A fast key takeaways. Avoid distance, shift to other modes, fueling and refueling technology, highway electrification, multimodal transport, drones, storage technology, hub and spoke model.
Requesting everyone to come for a group pic.